If you're looking for a perfect everyday bag that is light, durable, versatile, and hip for this summer, don't miss out on the newest addition to the Knack family of products, the Knack Sling Bag. It looks and feels great, whether at work or at the beach on a hot summer day.
Check out the link in the description to order yours with free shipping on all orders. Thanks to our friends at Knack for sponsoring this episode. If you get a Knack bag, don't forget to post it on social media and tag us at GameOnETB. We want to see you enjoying your Knack bag.
This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Showtime, folks. It's episode 20 of Game On, presented by Knack here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Johnny Montalbano along with Hank Indictor. Hank, welcome. How are you?
20 episodes already? I mean, granted, I've only been around for technically 16 or 17, but still, it's going by pretty fast, isn't it, Johnny?
Absolutely, and it's been 20 episodes, but it's really been more like 25 when you think of all the specials that we've done with the crossovers with our buddies over at Empty the Bench. You've also,
True.
For me personally, the Monty moments, which there's going to be plenty more of those as football season comes up. So yeah, 20 shows in. It definitely comes at you quick. Summer's starting to wind down. We've got football. We had our first game last week. We've got preseason action for all 32 teams now starting up. We've got plenty of football news. And Hank, a couple of days ago, we all spoke, you, me, and the guys at Empty the Bench, and we were talking about how this week was going to be kind of a quiet week it was shaping up to be, and, well, all of a sudden now it has turned into another very busy episode. So we have a lot to discuss, as we normally do here on the show, but, of course, folks, there are plenty of ways for you to interact with Hank and myself about the show. You can follow us on our social media accounts, Game On Facebook at facebook.com/GameOnETB, on Twitter at GameOnETB, and also our Instagram account, GameOn_ETB, and our personal handles are on Twitter on the bottom of your screen. So, Hank, yet again, another busy show on tap. We're going to get to some basketball, big news that broke on Monday regarding the Brooklyn Nets, because, what would a summer be without talking about the Brooklyn Nets and the latest in that saga that's going on? Also, it wouldn't be a summer show without talking about Deshaun Watson. We'll get to that. There's some football nuggets to get into, but certainly a lot of baseball since you and I last did an episode of Game On. We had our Game On Empty the Bench trade deadline special last Tuesday, and a bunch of moves happened there, and we'll get into a little bit more specifics about that. We'll definitely lead things off here with the baseball because there's certainly a lot to get to, and we have to start with the Mets, who had a big 5-game series this past weekend against the Atlanta Braves, and they made a statement, Hank, winning 4 out of 5 against them. And this was a series that, when you look at it, I think was going to you were going to start to really get a sense of where the NL East is going here. And right now, as we sit here in early August, the Mets are showing you that, they are for real. There was a lot of discussion with Met fans and even us when we did our trade deadline special last week. Did the Mets do enough? Now, I was on record, and I did a Monty moment about this. The Mets, to me, were a loser of the trade deadline, and it wasn't necessarily because of the moves they made or didn't make, but the Braves improved. The Phillies improved. But you have to be fair. This is a special team because the moves that the Mets did make all contributed in this series against the Braves, whether it was Daniel Vogelbach, who all of a sudden is becoming a fan favorite. Tyler Naquin has been a great addition. He had 2 home runs in one game in one of the 5 games against the Braves. Darren Ruff has come through. Now, Michael Givens, the reliever, he struggled a little bit. But yet again, the Mets have shown you, resiliency, starting pitching. They have Jacob deGrom back now, and look at the start that he had in that 5th game on Sunday. If they're all healthy, Hank, this is a team that has got to be taken very, very seriously here. And There's one big 4-game series coming up next week for the Mets against the Atlanta Braves. But right now, as we sit here in early to mid-August, I think you have to say right now, given everything that's going on, the Mets are the best team in the NL East.
And what has two thumbs and is eating his words right now? This guy. Why did I pick them to finish in third? That was so dumb. But in all seriousness,
crazy. I'll be honest with you. I mean, you and I both did, but at the same time, I don't know what I forget what you said, but I still thought the Mets were a wild card team. And
I thought they were, but I just didn't think they were necessarily better than the Phillies and Braves. And part of that was based off of something that I've been used to seeing out of the Mets. And, you know, I don't think that really had as much to do with my pinstripe bias whatsoever. Part of it also had to do with the fact that, you know, I thought, you know, maybe they would have a catastrophic injury or two that would probably hurt their chances. And while technically I was half right about the injury part, I mean, they didn't have Jacob deGrom pitch his first game until, like, say, a week or two ago. The fact of the matter, and they did lose Scherzer for a good portion of the season. The fact of the matter is, the Mets still kept finding ways to win, and, you know, that has a lot to do with the fact that they are a much better managed team than in years past. Got to give Buck credit where credit is due, and got to also give credit to the fact that while their lineup, I think I still like, I wouldn't call their lineup the best. Like, it's definitely been a lot better than they've had in years past. You're getting hits out of Starling Marte, and I would definitely say that contract looks even better as the season's going along. You're getting good moments from Canna, and, you know, obviously Pete Alonso, while he's probably not going to finish in the top 5, you can definitely make an argument for him that he is posting MVP caliber numbers for the Mets, and, you know, that's what they wanted of him. And then there are other guys who are having improved seasons, particularly Jeff McNeil, who last year really fell off, but now is showing a bit of a comeback. And then, not to mention, you've got guys like Brandon Nimmo, good leadoff hitter and a good catalyst in that lineup. He had like a 330 batting average. I think I've mentioned he was the guy I would definitely take out of their lineup if I had to steal one player from that team on a review and preview episode. But yeah, the Mets are definitely, I don't know what to say anymore. Like, I'm happy for them and some of my good friends who are hardcore Met fans, but I mean, look, still want to see how they do in October, but I don't want to be that much of a jerk about it. I mean, look, they're still doing well. Got to give them credit where credit is due. And how many other teams can say they boast Max Scherzer and DeGrom? Now, they better hope that those two stay healthy, but, you know,
sure,
if you have them at the top of your rotation in the playoffs, you've got a chance.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm going at here, because, you know, we're going to talk about the Dodgers in a little bit, but yeah, that's one of the main differences with this team. You know, to me, like we documented before, it starts at the top. You know, it starts with an owner that's not afraid to spend in Steve Cohen and a general manager. It also starts with Buck Showalter being the manager. You know, the Mets have not had a legitimate, capable manager since Terry Collins. And, you know, whether it was Mickey Callaway or Luis Rojas, Buck has come in here and, you know, he's an old school guy. You know, the clubhouse seems to be very, very favorable. So he's helped in that regard. And then the pitching staff, you know, getting Max Scherzer, getting Chris Bassett. You know, with Chris Bassett, he's that swing guy because, you know, while he's had a couple of rough starts here, when he's on, I mean, it just lengthens that rotation. And, you know, Carlos Carrasco's got 10-plus wins. You know, Taijuan Walker, I know he had a bad start Friday, but Taijuan Walker's got good starts too. So you're talking about 4 to 5 very capable starters in that rotation. And now with Jacob deGrom back, it just adds to that. And it's really scary when you said top 2, deGrom and Scherzer. I mean, that is something that if it gets lined up properly, the Mets can almost be favored in any series against any team. It is that dangerous of a rotation. And then when it comes to the lineup, you know, Alonso having another great year, McNeil, like you said, bouncing back in a big way to the McNeil of a couple of years ago. He had an off year last year. Francisco Lindor has been fantastic. Second year now in New York. Everybody was really questioning that after his first year, but he has returned in a big, big way. He's been great. Even Eduardo Escobar over at third base, he's had some struggles, but at times he's gone off. He could have 3-4 home runs in a series. He's been great, defensively as well. And then the outfield, Nimmo gets on base. Marte's been great. Canna's been there. And now you have Tyler Naquin, who comes over from the Reds, and he hits 2 home runs in one game. Daniel Vogelbach shores up that DH spot. He got off to a bit of a struggle with the Mets, but he's taken off the last few games. He's also been a sensation with one of his plays of running on the bases. So Mets have a lot of things going for them. And also, let's not also forget, too, their closer right now, Edwin Diaz, who struggled the first couple of years here. I mean, he's making a case right now, and it's not going to happen, but he's making a case. He's going to get some Cy Young and MVP votes because he has been that dominant as the closer. So all these bounce backs and all these things that are happening, it's you don't want to say it's amazing and magical, but it is. Now, and they're saying that, the catching position was one that we were talking about. Maybe the Mets were going to upgrade at the deadline, but almost like with the Yankees, I could sacrifice offense from the catching position if they call a great game. And that's what they've been able to do. Mm-hmm. Whether it's been McCann or even Tomas Nido, who's actually gotten some big hits, Patrick Mazeika. So they've had 2 to 3 options at catcher. And again, I would sacrifice offense in the catching position if, they're going to call a great game. So right now, as we sit here, the things that do concern me with the Mets going forward here is their bullpen leading up into Diaz. Now they get Michael Givens, who Buck Showalter knows well from his Orioles days, but they didn't really shore up that bullpen. I know Trevor May is back. Joely Rodriguez, who struggled, he had a big outing on Sunday. He pitched 2 1/3 innings of scoreless relief. So the bullpen would be probably the one area that I would be concerned at. But look at this rotation. If they're all together and they're all healthy, it's very rare that they have an all-star. And if they have one bad start, then you're seeing their offense at times being able to bail them out. Now, we still have about 2 months to go in the season here, so there's a lot that could still happen. But right now, all the things are shaping up that the Mets are the best team in the NL East. The Braves are still going to be there. Again, big 4-game set again next week, and we'll know more possibly next week after that series. But, the Braves are still going to be there. The Phillies are going to be making that push for the wild card. But, right now you look in Mets land. There's a lot to like, and you've got to be very comfortable. And even if they, one of the things the Mets also have not had this year, Hank, I'm sorry, I'm going off a little bit here. One of the things they've not had this year is a long losing streak, and that has to do with that rotation and with Buck managing. You don't really.
I think they're one of only few teams that don't have a 3-game losing streak, and the only reason I even know that is because of a certain pinstripe team who is on a losing streak right now. But
yeah, and everybody's.
We'll
panicking.
talk about that later, and I'm sure you and I will have a lot to say. And I know I'll have some stuff to say too.
Yeah, and I'm going to probably disagree on a lot of it because it's been. I've seen the overreaction on social media.
Oh, I didn't say I was overreacting.
No, not you. Just the other Yankee fans online, and we're going to get to that. But with the Mets, okay. Look, it's definitely you got to be happy now. It's 70-39 after Sunday's win. It's shaping up in 2 weeks when they play again the second installment of the Subway Series. That's going to be epic. The first installment was epic. The second one's going to be just as, considering where both teams are. But to me, right now, and I know I said the Braves are the best team, but the way the Mets are, if they're going to be like this, they are the best team in the National League East. It's hard to say. It's hard to say no unless their pitching staff starts to slump. And the only way I think it's going to start to slump, really, and you hope this doesn't be the case, is if they're going to get hurt. But there's no signs of that right now. And so now, they're playing the Reds this week, and then before they take on the Braves again next week. So we'll know by the end of next week, I think, where they are. They go down to Atlanta next week, and they take 3 out of 4, and they take off in this division. Then, yeah, and I'll say this, like I said to you a second ago, if this rotation's healthy, they can match up against any team in the National League. Whether it's the Brewers whether it's the Dodgers who've won 30 out of 35 or the revamped Padres. Yeah, they may not be the best team, but the way that their rotation, if it lines up properly, they could challenge any of those teams. It is that dangerous the way things are right now.
Yeah, I oh my gosh. And that's obviously later on down the line this month, but I'm really intrigued to see that series between them and the Dodgers. I mean,
That's
like
right.
you got the Dodgers like now having the best record in baseball. Somehow they're undefeated despite having Mr. Strikeout on the roster. I'm of course talking about Joey Gallo, but I mean,
Of course, yeah.
not like that really matters much. I mean, look at what else you got in that lineup. You got a Freddie Freeman here, you got a Max Muncy there, you got a Mookie Betts here, you got, oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. And then that pitching staff, I mean, who knows? Maybe they could match up with the Mets, but then again, you also have Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom, so I think that could really keep the Mets in a series. I think really, ultimately, I think the only thing that really the Dodgers would have that's better is the lineup. And again, I still think if the Mets were willing to take that risk, I mean, maybe they could have had a JD Martinez in that lineup. Gosh, can you imagine if they did have end up getting JD Martinez and Wilson Contreras? I think I'd probably think more highly about their chances in the playoffs with those two. But then again, I mean, we don't really know what those two teams are really asking. I mean, look, if they were able to get rid of Vientos for JD Martinez, it might have hurt. But at the same time, if you really trust your scouting, then I think you can make up for that by finding another pitcher like him.
I know you're not going to like to hear this, but I remember Billy Epler, the GM, was on talking about their top prospects and how they really didn't want to move them. And I would have made the push for JD Martinez.
Me too. Me too.
That would have been the perfect guy. I actually was not against not getting Contreras. Now I know they needed an upgraded catcher, but at the same time, then you're talking about an entirely different, pitch. The pitcher's got to learn an entirely new system. The catcher's going to have to as well. And Wilson Contreras is not that great of a defensive catcher, so I don't really know. I mean, if you're going to trade for a catcher just to improve the offense, I don't think that's what the Mets need. Like I said, I could sacrifice the offense behind the plate if you're calling a great game. And I compare that really to the Yankees because when they started this year, they were getting nothing out of catcher with Kyle Higashioka and Jose Trevino before Trevino really took over. But I would have sacrificed that if you call a great game, and that's what they've been doing. So I didn't necessarily think they needed to upgrade there at catcher. JD Martinez, though, to me was the perfect guy for the Mets. Now,
if the Mets had done their homework regarding JD Martinez, they would know that if you look at what he's done, given Boston, Detroit, Arizona, he's a guy that literally makes a lot of lineups better. He's a guy who literally watches film on his swings, and he's a guy that can definitely make a big difference in a lineup. I think that's the guy, if there's anybody you definitely would have to pull the trigger on if you're the New York Mets. And as I said, even if somehow you lose one of your pitching prospects, like say a Ronnie Mauricio or a Vientos, again, those guys aren't irreplaceable. If you have the right scouting department, you can find another pitcher who can throw hard like them.
Yeah, I think that would seem to be a trend along the deadline too, was the prospect talk. And it was like that with the Yankees too. You know what? They were not willing to sacrifice their big prospects to get players. They got players, but at the right price. So,
and I kind of find it odd that they didn't want to trade for those guys just because of Sandy Alderson making the mistake of trading Pete Crow Armstrong for Javi Baez. I mean, I'm sorry, but JD Martinez is a much different animal than Javi Baez. I think that was a much different GM making the trade for one thing, and you look at that mistake. I mean, look, you traded a minor leaguer for a guy who is very much a free swinger, strikes out a lot, and a guy who turned out to be cancer in that locker room. I mean, look at how he and Lindor were doing the thumbs down stuff.
Yeah, I also think that if that happened now, that wouldn't happen because you have Buck Showalter there and not at the time, Luis Rojas. I think that has something to do with it too. But that was an entirely different team last year too.
Yeah.
But I do think that did have something to do with it as well. That they didn't want to trade a prospect for a rental. And it's funny, a little bit of a fun fact. I know Pete Crow Armstrong, because he was on the low A affiliate of the Cubs, the Myrtle Beach Pelicans, who I see frequently down here. And I think now he's in Double A. But yeah, that might have been it too. But at the same time, the other thing, so they get Darren Ruff for J.D. Davis and a couple of prospects. The one other aspect you looked at too is maybe they didn't want to mess up the team that they had right now. The team's been so successful the way it's been that they thought maybe just keeping the team the way it is would have been just fine. And getting Jacob deGrom back a couple of weeks ago could have been just as powerful as a trade deadline acquisition. They got Trevor May back for the bullpen. And this lineup has been able to produce the way it's been. I think a lot of people were talking about the fact they needed another big-time power bat. I know I've said it here on the show too. But this offense, the way it's been producing this year, I mean, they have guys that get on base. And then, Alonso powers them in. They've also played the station-to-station game. I mean, yeah, you don't see that much happen in baseball anymore. But their lineup maybe are right that it can survive and thrive and go forward here.
I agree with that. I just, once again, for their sake, and see, look, this is just me being a nice guy to the Met fans that I know. Like, hopefully for your sake, not getting JD doesn't come back to haunt you.
Well, see, here's the thing though, too. When you went into this season with the Mets, I don't think World Series was their aspiration. Really, I think you were just trying to make strides here in year one in the Buck and stuff. So
I'm not so sure. I feel like it was. I mean, you
maybe
don't go out.
I don't know year one though. I mean, the thing is now you look at it. As of Sunday, they're 70-39. Now you're going to start looking at maybe that you want to make the World Series, but you still got the Dodgers and the Padres. I think are still going to be a challenge too. See, it's tough because you look at that rotation and it's tempting to think that they can make the World Series. But you mean to tell me right now, if you're a Met fan, that if they get bounced out in the first round, that it's not a successful season? Considering where they were last year.
I'll agree to disagree. Agree because, I mean, yeah, this is probably one of the best seasons, at least record-wise, that they've had since, let's say, 2006. I mean, I know the 2015 was a good one and they made the World Series, but I mean, that team wasn't like in first place from like start to finish. This team like is kind of wire to wire, much like the 06 team. Cause like, there haven't really been many instances where the Braves were like in first place. I mean, they've been close, but they've just never been able to overtake the Mets. And I've already been seeing my buddy Noah ranting about the Braves, like not taking advantage on Facebook. But getting
him on the show because I know he's a big Braves fan.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that is long overdue.
We may get him on. We'll try and get him on for next week since they play another big 4-game series. But yeah, I mean this is the best team since 06. I mean you have to remember that 15 and 16 team. I mean had to play unbelievable down the stretch just to get into the playoffs itself. I mean I remember that was a team that was having Eric Campbell back cleanup at points during the season.
Gosh, I remember that.
And
I remember going to the game where they got no hit by Chris Heston.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean those two teams, and that's why I was saying Terry Collins was so underappreciated as Met manager because that team did almost like the Rays did more with less than a lot of other teams. And I understand their pitching, their starting pitching is so strong, but the bullpen still got some flaws, and the lineup, as great as it could be, they could be shut down at times too. So to me, I mean, this has been a successful season. I mean, the Mets bow out in the first round or so. I mean, of course, it depends on who they're bowing out to. If you match up against the Dodgers or the Padres, they've got powerful guys, and the Dodgers have a great rotation too. I mean, they're doing this also most of this last stretch without Kershaw, who just got hurt again. And remember, Walker Buehler's still been out. So, I mean, Tony Gonsolin's been fantastic, that pitching staff. And they're still getting guys back in that bullpen too. So Dodgers are going to be, a tall task. I just think the Mets, I didn't say the Mets could beat the Dodgers, but I think they could match up and really give them a challenge because of that rotation and really anybody with the way that it is. But, I mean, you got to be very, very excited right now because that was a statement series for the Mets. And right now they are the best team in the National League East as we sit here in early August. Now, on the other side of town, the New York Yankees, who had a very, very interesting trade deadline. I gave them an A because they addressed the needs that they needed to do. They went out there, they got a number 2 starter, mission accomplished. They went out there and got a contact bat in the outfield, Andrew Benintendi. They got 2 relievers, and that was something they needed to shore up as well. The very interesting thing with the Yanks here, and I remember when we did our show last week, was the last-minute move to acquire Harrison Bader for Jordan Montgomery. And then, of course, fate have it that Montgomery's first start as a Cardinal would be against the Yankees last weekend. So, for the most part, the Yanks had
a revenge.
Yeah, and I thought that was strange because, to me, Jordan Montgomery was very underrated this year with the Yanks. And I get the discussion. I remember this weekend watching the Fox broadcast and Ken Rosenthal's talking about how they feel like Montgomery would have been the odd man out in the rotation if the playoffs had started, which I don't necessarily get why. This is a guy that's made all of his starts this year, has gotten very little run support in stretches throughout. So you mean to tell me that you would have stuck a Domingo Germán or somebody like that ahead of Jordan Montgomery in the rotation? I don't buy that. I mean, your rotation would have been Cole, Montez, Cortez, Severino. I mean, I guess Montgomery would be in the bullpen, but you mean to tell me that he wouldn't have even made the postseason roster? I can't buy that. As Domingo Germán can't pitch deep into the games, and Cortez right now, he's been kind of on an innings limit. He's been struggling a bit as of late. But, Hank, I know you're a big Yankee fan like I am. They still at 70-39, but this last little stretch, has brought out a lot of, to me, overreaction from Yankee fans on social media. But, you're a very realistic guy like I am. I'm curious now, these last couple of games post All-Star break, what do you make of them?
Well, first of all, weren't the Yankees bound to have a really bad stretch eventually after all that winning that they've been doing? Like, wouldn't you rather, why are we complaining now? Wouldn't you rather have this losing streak now than, say, you go to October, you're like going guns ablazing, and all of a sudden you play the Astros and you have a 2001 Mariners like experience against that team? Just that's the first thought that's coming to my mind. Second of all, why are we judging these moves based off of what's happening one week after they've happened? Look, I know Benintendi's been there a little bit longer, and I get that he's been struggling, but I mean, look, I'm not that surprised that he's struggling out of the gate, although he did have a good game yesterday in the near comeback against the St. Louis Cardinals. But still, I think Benintendi is going to get his stuff together. Like, I mean, look, this is a guy. The reason we got this guy is because he's not like every hitter in that lineup. He's a guy that like hits for contact for the most part. He has a high batting average, and other than maybe what happened in one of the games against Seattle, he's not a strikeout guy. So I'm not worried about Andrew Benintendi, and not to mention he's played in enough big games. So should I really be panicking about him? And second of all, let me get to Montas. He pitched his first start not too long after he had something happen to him and his family. And he pitched in the 100-degree heat in St. Louis. Are we really going to judge this based on, given the circumstances, is it really fair to call him a Yankee bust too quickly? Come on now. Like, be real. Be real, like Yankee fans. Be real. And third of all, Clay Holmes. Again, he'd been having like numbers that were like, I don't want to say Mariano-like, but I mean 0.71 during a stretch like at the All-Star break. I mean, that's about as good as it gets now. And now all of a sudden you want to move him out of the closer's role just because he had a few bad starts from Oregon. Look, I get it. Okay. Like, have those pitching performances he had were bad, but As far as the Cardinal series, I don't know if I would have pitched him in the 8th inning for a 6-out save, though. I think that one, I think, was more to do with, like, say, Aaron Boone / Brian Cashman, and where they wanted to have their guys pitching, not so much Clay Holmes. Not to make excuses for Clay Holmes, but that's just the reality. And third of all, are we forgetting that the Cardinals are a somewhat decent team? I mean, look, I'm not going to repeat what a certain member of the Empty the Bench Network said about them as we were previewing the season. He may have the same name as one of our producers here. I think that's exactly what I'm referring to. But the Cardinals are still pretty solid. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a team that has Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt in the lineup, and Goldschmidt's pretty much, going to win the batting title and very well could win the MVP if he gets enough votes for it. And now, as far as Paul DeJong killing us, not good. But to say that we're already losing, and also because Luis Castillo dominated them, and look, that one I'm just going to give Luis Castillo credit where credit is due. He dominated in his first game as a Mariner, and he did what he expected. But you don't see me canceling any plans for a ticker tape parade. Not that I made any plans for a ticker tape parade to begin one. I mean, Johnny, let me ask you a question. When do I ever plan parades before a season for any of my teams? That would be almost never.
You don't.
And when am I? You don't see me crowning the Seattle Mariners as the new scary team of the AL West. I mean, they're getting better, but I still think they have a bit of a ways to go. And it all depends on whether they can re-sign Luis Castillo. But those are tomorrow's problems for them. And I think they'll be significantly better next year. But that's going besides the point. I'm rambling and going.
Oh, that's okay.
I think the Yankees, I'm not that worried about the Yankees. At the end of the day, we're still 10 games up on the Toronto Blue Jays. Although, don't get me wrong, the Toronto Blue Jays do scare me. I'm not going to act like I'm not going to be dismissive about them just because they're 10 games behind. But I think the Yankees are still okay. Now, as far as Garrett Cole goes, yeah. Am I concerned about him? Yeah. 3 home runs in the first inning against Seattle. No bueno. Hopefully he can. Now, does that mean he can't earn my trust back? No, of course not. I think if he has a good September, then, maybe he'll earn my trust back. Maybe he'll prove me wrong. After all, look, at the end of the day, I want Garrett Cole to go up to me and say, fuck you, Hank. I'm going to go pitch dominant in September and October, and I'm going to carry them to win the World Series. But with the way he's been, and I still have images of him in that October game against the Red Sox. Well, yeah. I have every reason to be concerned. But
that's fair.
The Yankees, I still think should at least be in the ALCS. But as far as going against the Astros, we'll talk about that when we get closer there. If we get to the LCS, I don't want to jinx it. Sorry.
No, that's fair. First of all, Garrett Cole is not healthy at the wild card game, so I'm not trying to make excuses. But,
no, I'm aware.
But, if you're not healthy, it affects your performance. That's what it comes
I'm aware, but don't go up to the manager, give him the ball, and say I'm fucking done, and then leave the mound. I'm sorry about my French. I'm just so pissed.
Just think what happens if that happens again this year. Let's hope not. But yeah, Cole's biggest thing this year, Hank's really been just there's been always one inning in some of these starts where just he has a meltdown inning. The 6 runs against the Mariners in the first inning, that meltdown in the 7th inning against the Orioles in a start a couple of weeks ago. There's always been one inning with Cole that it gets to him and he loses it.
I have a name for that, by the way. One bad inning-itis.
Yeah, and that seems to be the case with Cole. But here's the thing now that I'm starting to look at with this Yankees pitching staff, and in terms of their recent play here, their starting pitching was dynamite for most of the season to start. But these last few weeks, Cole's had those meltdown innings, that one inning itis in a few of his starts. Nestor Cortez and I think you had to expect was going to come back to earth here. But his thing right now is he's not pitching deep. He's only going like 5 innings a start and 5 innings, 3 runs. Now, with this kind of lineup, that can be all right. But, he hasn't really given you length. Montez, he's had 1 start. I'm not going to go crazy about that. But because now they traded Jordan Montgomery and then they put They transferred Severino over to the 60-day injured list. Now you're going to see guys like Domingo Germán pitch more. Jamison Tyon's also had a lot of struggles as of late. And the thing with this rotation, Hank, and this is what does actually concern me about the Yankees, and it's something that I have brought up, so this is not an overreaction. You have guys on the staff right now that are entering uncharted territory. Tyon, full season, hasn't really done that. Nestor Cortez is in a territory that he's never done before. Severino has never pitched a full season, and obviously now he's hurt again. So that's 3/5 of your rotation right there that are in uncharted territories. And Garrett Cole, who faded down the stretch last year, is that going to happen again this year? That to me is why the Jordan Montgomery trade actually, and I like Harrison Bader, and he's going to shore up something that the Yankees desperately need. But that's why I was not a fan of trading Jordan Montgomery, because the one thing he was this year was durable. He made every one of his starts. He got no run support most of the time. I mean, if you look at his lines this year and how he's gotten no decisions, to me, he was a very durable, I'm not saying number 2 starter, but somebody that could pitch in the postseason for this team. So
I have something I want to say about that trade. And I'm sorry I didn't get to that when I was going on my whole spiel about why you shouldn't overreact to the Yankees. But out of all the trades, that was really the only one that, I don't know if blindside's really the word to use, but that was the one that really confused me, just for the sheer fact that, you got rid of a pitcher, and didn't everyone say we needed pitching, and you ruined your depth, which I get why they had to get rid of the pitcher now, because I mean, look, it's going to be overcrowded come September once Severino comes back. But I guess now I'm somewhat seeing how it makes sense for a few reasons. One, Harrison Bader is a good defensive outfielder, and I think they wanted to be more sound in that part of their game. But I don't know. Did you know about the reports that they were that close to trading for Pablo Lopez, and they traded Montgomery with the idea that they would get Lopez anyways?
And if you I do, and if you remember, the Montgomery trade was announced very close to the end of the deadline. So
yeah,
I think they were probably right on the brink of getting him, but again, that the prospects got in the way. It's it's a reason why they didn't get Luis Castillo, was because of the prospect talk. I like Harrison Bader, and that's the thing. The Yankees, we were talking about on the show here about getting a center fielder. I had brought up guys like Ramon Laureano, Brian Reynolds. I have no problem with Bader, and I understand he's injured. I just think right now with the rotation the way it is, and you have 3/5 of it entering uncharted territory, that's why, to me, I could not trade Jordan Montgomery, and I could live with the depth piece. And I get Ken Rosenthal's reporting about how the Yankees were saying that Montgomery was going to be probably an odd man out in the playoffs, but you've got to get there. And I know the Yankees are going to be there, but I want to, even if we have to move to a 6-man rotation, and I know they're not really key on doing that, I guess he would have been the odd man out. That's why I guess you deal him. And you get a need probably because you need defense in center field. Aaron Hicks just not cutting it, and I can't keep Aaron Judge in center field. Look, offensively, career year. I know he's played a right in center field, but you got to rest his legs too. So I have no problem moving him. I think he needs to go back to right field and stay there permanently. When Stanton's fully back, when that team's fully together, he can DH all the time. Maybe he plays a little bit of outfield too, and gives Judge a little bit of a break. So I get that, and that's why I like Benintendi to shore up left field. Bader probably comes in, is that late defensive replacement in center. Now that Gallo's gone, there's an open spot there. Hicks is just not cutting it. So I really had no problem with that. I just think that Jordan Montgomery was being very underrated. And look what he did in his first start against the Yankees. 5 1/3 innings of no run ball. And that's, again, this lineup, they have the ability, they can score a lot of runs like they did Sunday, or they could be 2-hit like they were Saturday. Their lineup is so polarizing that you don't know what you're going to get. And if your rotation is going to not pitch deep, and then you get into the middle relief of the bullpen, which seems to be every team's weakness, that's why I actually am a little bit concerned about this team, despite the fact that they are pitching so well. Now, can they correct it? Do they have time to correct it? Absolutely. But, Holmes now comes back to earth. Chapman scares you. Now you got to get to them, though. That's
No,
that's the thing. And I like
that's totally
Efros,
fair.
and I think Lou Trevino here. One of the big reasons they brought him in was if they do match up against the Astros, he's got great numbers against those guys, and I think he needed a change of scenery too. But and fortunately, you have time on your side now to try and correct these woes. But that's why I think there is a little bit of cause for concern because you do have most of your staff now entering some unfamiliar territory.
So, in other words, I think we're sort of agreeing to disagree just for the sheer fact that I think it can be corrected. But then again, keep in mind, I'm also kind of a cautiously optimistic person for the most part, even though lately with the Yankees, I really haven't had much reason to be just because, every time they get to the okay, let's not go there. But no, on the other hand, do I entirely disagree with you? Absolutely not. I mean, you and I have been watching the same team. I know that the offense is very, very, I guess you could say streaky is the word to describe them. I mean, one night they could be scoring 11 runs and another night they can have trouble with runners in scoring position. And it's been better this year than in years past. So I'll give them that. But I think one thing that has also been, a cause for concern is whenever they face these big these good lefties like a Jordan Montgomery, that's something that has hurt them in years past. So that's why, again, like I said, you don't see me planning any ticker tape parades as we speak. And as I said, I never predict a ticker tape parade unless I'm absolutely sure.
Right. And they'll make the playoffs, but we'll have to see. Hopefully their lineup gets fully healthy. I think, one of the things this lineup has this year versus last year is that they've got a healthy DJ LeMahieu, and you see that he is bouncing back in a nice way this year. Anthony Rizzo's been great. I know he's missed the last couple of games, but, he's been fantastic. So, I mean, they've got their lineup is better, but it still, to me, has concern, because – I mean, let's be fair right now. You're not really getting much out of shortstop. You're not getting really much out of third base. I mean, the outfield's fine, but in the catching position, you've gotten more than I think you ever could expect for. But, I mean, there are some holes. That's the thing. But they do have time to correct it, and we'll find out. I mean, this is one of the advantages of building such a big lead. I guess, though, your thing, though, would be you really want to end up with the best record. And as we sit here, they are a half game better than Houston, but right now they've also got the Mets in the National League that are also with the same record, and the Dodgers who are right now 75 and 33. I mean, what they're doing, they've rattled off 30 out of 35. I mean, you at least want to have the home field through the ALCS, and then I'll worry about the World Series. I mean, because you just don't want to be going down to Houston and playing those critical. Important games if it comes to that way later on in the year. We've seen that now happen twice, and what's happened both times. So we'll find out with the Yanks what happens here. But I still like their deadline moves. Look, if they're going to go down, if they're not going to make the World Series or anything, you cannot fault Brian Cashman because he's done everything that he can do to shore up this team and stuff. But unfortunately, he's going to probably be the fall guy. And I hate to say it, as much as I like Aaron Boone. There's going to be a lot of talk about him if they don't make it because of the strong start they got to this season. It's not like in years past where they've gotten off the slow starts and have had to rally to get into the playoffs. I mean, they got off to such a fast start this year and have played great pretty much throughout that it seems like anything short of a World Series would be a major disappointment.
But I really hope my biggest fears don't come to fruition. Let me do this once again just for the hell of it. Knock on wood.
Yep.
And here's hoping that with time, my fears are alleviated and they can get past the Astros because, as I've mentioned, how is it that I was a seventh grader the last time I was enjoying a World Series championship?
Well, baseball's changed. The Yankees as an organization, the way they've run now, it's changed, and baseball teams have just gotten better.
Susan.
It certainly is. I mean, look at it. I mean, even the best team, even the Yanks are going to lose 60 games this year. Even in a great year, it's going to happen. So,
Every good team loses a lot of games. It's a known fact.
Yeah, but we'll find out here with the Yanks what happens. Now, one other big story that happened with the trade deadline was obviously the Padres getting Juan Soto. That happened on trade deadline day. And they just had a big series against the Dodgers this weekend, and the Dodgers swept them and now lead the NL West by 15 and a half games. Now, the thing with this is, though, and a lot of this talk's been, how the Dodgers are running away too. But let's remember one thing here with the Padres. So they just got Juan Soto at the deadline. And Fernando Tatis is nearing a return. He's now playing in rehab games, and he could be back maybe in the next week or so. So the Padres are going to be a different team when the wild card starts here. They're at 61 and 50. So right now, the Braves are 64 and 46. So right now, you look at it, they do have a wild card spot. And I'll tell you this. The Padres, if they get that lineup together, and you've got Soto, Tatis, Machado, Will Myers, some of the versatile players that they have, Cronenworth and Profar, to me, the Padres can still be a dangerous team. So, but the way that the expanded playoffs right now, it does make the National League more wide open. But the way the Dodgers are playing right now, it's 75 and 33. Now with Kershaw out again. The way they're rolling right now is dangerous. And, even Cody Bellinger hitting 2 home runs on Sunday night. I mean, the Dodgers are really, really dangerous here. That's the thing to see here. But at the same time, when Tatis comes back and you give him a few games under his belt and hopefully he's going to be all right, Padres lineup is going to be tough to pitch to.
Yeah, no, that team is pretty much stacked, and what can I say? Preller Palooza strikes again, and you know why he pulled off that trade, right? Because he knows, as Terry Collins would say, his ass is in the jackpot if they don't finally make the playoffs. The reason I say finally, I'm not counting 2020. You know how I feel about that season.
I think we all know how we feel about that season.
Yeah, I think the Padres definitely have a shot. I think it depends on how their pitching holds up, but what isn't as talked about as much as the Juan Soto trade, I actually like that they went after Josh Hader to shore up their bullpen. Yeah. I mean, now granted, his ERA has been a little bit higher this year, so I do see that there could be a little bit of risk involved, but I think even though it could work for the Brewers in the sense that maybe Trevor Rogers turns things around there, the fact of the matter is he also was losing a lot of games for the Padres. So I think looking at that deal, I think that the Padres definitely got the better end of that deal. And I think the crazy part, another thing that no one's really talked about, if they gave up bigger prospects for Josh Hader, there's no way that Juan Soto trade happens.
Yeah.
The Juan Soto / Josh Bell trade, because I think Josh Bell.
I forgot about Bell.
I think Josh Bell is just as important of an addition as Juan Soto. I mean, look at his numbers this year. He had the best average in the Nationals lineup, and you could even make the argument that Josh Bell could have been an all-star this year too. He was definitely an underrated member of that team.
Definitely. And just going back to what you were saying about the Soto trade, the thing that I really liked about it too from the Padres perspective, this is not just about 1 year. So say the Padres get bounced out, if they make the wild card and they get bounced out in the wild card round, you still have 2 more years of control with Soto before you have to make a move. And that's 2 years then with him, Machado, and Tatis. I mean, that's a dangerous 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 5, wherever you want to put it. So they have a couple of years that they could do it. And, Jake Cronenworth's a good player there at second base. And, they've got versatile guys. So, I mean, it does give the Padres 2 or 3 years here to get it done. And, it's not like the Diamondbacks or the Rockies are making strides. The Giants are that kind of swing team in that division. But really, your focus is on the Dodgers, really. And then even if, you have the Dodgers, you can still get into the wild card spot. So the Padres do have a couple of year window here with the Soto trade. And that's why I thought for the Padres, it made much more sense than for a few other teams.
Yeah, I
But
definitely would agree with that. And like I said, they were able to get rid of trade like some of the blue chip prospects that were rumored to be on the move in that trade. And I still think it's amazing that they didn't give up any of those guys in the Hader trade.
Well, you think about it, one of the guys they gave up in the Tater trade, Dinelson
He
Lamont,
got
got
DFA'd.
DFA'd. Yeah. So, I mean, you
I
almost could
think
bring him back.
the Padres are already winning that trade just because of that alone.
Yeah. He's a very interesting guy because I know he's been talked about as, I mean, he's had great numbers, but he's always hurt. I mean, do you think maybe the Padres bring him back as a reliever if they could get him back? Something to keep an eye out for.
Oh, can you imagine?
Well, I mean, we'll see. I mean,
Can you imagine they essentially get him get one of those players back? That'd be nuts.
You know, I'm always a fan of if guys go out on get DFA'd or go out on the waiver wire. Now, obviously, there's no waiver wire deadline anymore. But if some guys get DFA'd, and you want to make a push. I mean, you think about it. If Travis Janikowski got DFA'd by the Mariners, I said Mets should bring him back. Franmil Reyes got DFA'd. You know, the guy had 30 home runs with the Guardians a year or so ago. He got DFA'd. I would have brought him in, but the Cubs claimed him, so that goes out. But I mean, I'm always looking at guys to get on the waiver wire just to bring in and see what they could do. I mean, it can't hurt, especially nowadays. But we'll find out. But the Padres are going to be a very interesting team to watch in the NL West and in the National League in general, and so are the Dodgers, who just continue to do it here at 75 and 33. Hank, some sad news, though, in the baseball and really in the sports world. And speaking of the Dodgers, was Tuesday night. So as we go to bed Tuesday night, post-trade deadline, news came down that Vin Scully passed away at 94. And, you know, you don't even need to be a sports fan really to know about Scully. And, boy, so many things, to discuss regarding him. You know, everybody focuses him being the Dodger announcer for 67 years, but you know what? I remember him, obviously the 86 World Series with the Mets. He was on the call there. He did golf. If you were watching the PGA Tour on CBS this weekend, they were showing his golf highlights that he did. And remember, one of his actually more famous calls was the 49er playoff game with Dwight Clark. So
January 5th, 1982.
Right. So, it's just so many memories with Vin. We almost could spend an entire separate episode talking about Vin Scully. But Hank, what are your memories about him?
I think it's astounding that during the years in which he called the Dodgers, there are people who lived and died during that whole span. 67 years with one franchise. And he came up, and what's scary? He was probably younger than we are right now when he made his debut with the Dodgers. I think the story goes somebody saw him call a game for Fordham. I think it got the attention of Red Barber, and he called games with Red Barber. And Red Barber pretty much knew that he was a natural with the Brooklyn Dodgers. And he called, I believe, 25 World Series, 12 All-Star games, at least 20 no-hitters, and I know 3 perfect games, one of which would have been Sandy Koufax. And I actually remember not too long ago, I was listening to one of his calls. I think it was when Koufax threw the perfect game against the Chicago Cubs, August 1965. I love how he sets the stage, giving everyone the time of night, what was going on, and then Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed. A perfect game. 1-0. The LA Dodgers would beat the Chicago Cubs in that game, and they go on to win that World Series that year. And then what also isn't talked about was he called Hank Aaron's 715th home run, April 8th, 1974. And, you mentioned a lot of the World Series calls he made. For me, my personal favorite call that he made was probably October 25th, 1986, Game 6. If you don't know which moment that I'm talking about, you either don't care about baseball or you're living under a rock. Mookie Wilson up at bat.
Yep.
It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it. And then that actually isn't my favorite part of the call. No talking for like maybe 5-10 minutes, all you hear is the crowd noise and the celebration, which if you're listening to this right now, if you're a broadcaster or you're trying to become a broadcaster, that's what you're supposed to do after a big moment. Less is more. You let the crowd talk. And then Vin Scully had the perfect line. If one picture is worth 1,000 words, you have seen about 1,000,000 words. But more than that, you have seen a bizarre finish to Game 6 of the 1986 World Series. The Mets are not only alive, they are well, and they will play Game 7 tomorrow night, even though the rain actually proved it wrong. It was actually 2 nights later.
Right.
But yeah, no, that whole statement afterwards, I was like, wow. And then, of course, the Kirk Gibson home run. I mean,
sure, I was actually just about to get there. Was one of my favorites, the '88 World Series, especially considering the moment. And if you remember Kirk Gibson, who was hobbling to the plate and
could barely walk.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I was watching the game well because obviously that was before I was born. But I go back and I watched all the highlights and stuff. Yeah, there's so many great
and
calls.
Look who's coming up.
Yep. And I mean, it was even a lot of people don't remember. I mean, I don't remember him doing golf until I saw the highlights just a couple of days ago. He's done golf. Obviously, we know about the 49er catch in the playoffs. I mean, he's done football. I mean, a lot of memorable moments. I mean, in this day and age, you think about it, like the old school announcers, they're almost all gone. It's but. Yeah, no.
Now, by the way, I also want to give you another interesting fun fact regarding Vin Scully that isn't really talked about. So obviously he's been associated with the LA Dodgers, but he's also called pretty much some significant events at Candlestick Park, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Well, obviously because the Dodgers and the Giants were rivals, but one of the ones was the one that we just mentioned being the catch, but also he called what probably was the last game on the NBC Game of the Week at Candlestick Park. That was Game 5 when the Giants beat the Cubs in 5 games to go to the World Series, which, if you know that World Series, that was the one that was delayed because of the earthquake. But
sure.
And then also he, interestingly enough, called the last game at Candlestick Park, which I believe the Dodgers ended up beating the Giants September 30th, 1999. And I think that he was actually interviewed during halftime of the last game at Candlestick Park, which turned out to be the game where Navarro Bowman had that pick 6 to seal a playoff spot for the 49ers against the Atlanta Falcons. So there's a lot of interesting fun facts where you and I can go on and on about Vin Scully. In fact, I'm also going to go out on a limb and say he's probably narrated the most World Series highlight films out of anybody.
I just think also one thing – too was if you ever watched a Dodger game or a broadcast when he could also tell stories.
Oh my gosh!
Do it at the perfect time too, like during the game. I mean, he could do it early in the game, and you hear stories. I mean, you could go on stories for days. And remember, I mean, doing the game solo. I mean, it doesn't happen. Nope, that doesn't happen. There's nobody that does games solo anymore on TV. And even on radio, I mean, it's very, very rare. I mean, you have maybe one play-by-play guy, but you always have a partner there. And Vin, when he was in LA, did it by himself, and he could do it by himself. So, I mean, this hit, because obviously being a huge sports fans as we are, I mean, the name, the memories. I mean, he's been behind some of the best calls in baseball and sports history. I mean, it even goes behind baseball, like we just said. So, a tremendous loss, but full life lived. Look, we all hope that we could live a life like Vin Scully did, right? I mean, he'll be missed. I mean, that's for sure. But you know what? I'd say it was a very tough transition. One of the people I actually thought about, I went back to watch the highlight of it, was actually the Dodgers broadcast right now with Joe Davis, because you remember he took over when Vin retired. I mean, very tall order, but Joe Davis has stepped in and he's done a tremendous job. And I know he got very, very emotional. I almost got choked up on the air when the moment happened, because if you remember, last week the news was announced when the Dodgers were playing the Giants. So
and You know what's kind of interesting about that? Vin Scully actually grew up a Giants fan in Manhattan. He was in the Bronx from Manhattan.
Yeah, no, that's
and
true.
He also called his last game against the Giants in 2016, and that was when he made his now famous farewell speech. Which anytime I watch that, it brings a tear to my eye. Like anytime I just listen to Vin Scully talk, it gave me the chills. He's that special, and you don't see it too often where I get like hit really hard over someone who's in their mid-90s dying, but Vin Scully is different. He was just that special.
Well, I mean, if you
and that's coming from someone who is a hardcore pinstripe fan and does not like the Dodgers very much at all.
Well, think about it. It's just as a sports fan, it's been a very tough couple of weeks because last week we lost Bill Russell, and now this.
Oh my gosh!
And even just as a regular, even if you outside of sports, it's been tough because we lost on Monday. We lost Olivia Newton-John, and obviously, Grease. I mean, again, I was born in '90, but I've seen that. I don't see many movies, but I've seen that a million times. So
yep, me too. Me too, and I'm like 5-6 years younger than you. So
sure, yeah, no, for sure. But I mean, yeah, I think the only I remember getting emotional, when game show legends pass away. Obviously when Alex Trebek passed away, that was hard.
That hit me right in the feels. I love Alex Trebek, and I still say he's probably the best host in game show history. You could very well make that case. And
he's right up there. I mean,
you and I are big Jeopardy fans, so
yeah, I'm big game show fans too, and I mean he's right up there. I mean, if he's not number one, Hank, I'd say he's top 3.
Yeah,
I mean, he's right there. So, but one of the things I'll be doing over these next couple of days and still doing, you go on social media. That was one of the things too that also struck. So this happened like 11:30 on Tuesday night. Obviously, I was asleep by then. It's very rare that I stay up that late unless I'm out doing stuff or there's something on TV major that I have to stay up for. But the next day, when going through the highlights stuff, you could go through social media and people were posting Vin Scully clips, him talking during games, like I mentioned at the stories, just about anything in general, whether it's, current events, old baseball or sports stories. And it was like, wow, that's like remarkable. And there won't be anybody like that.
No.
I mean, I guess you could say like John Sterling on the Yankees radio network, he could talk about stories, but that's still not even the same because that's radio versus TV. But now
you're making me sad thinking about the possibility of losing him. But
no. Listen, look. I mean, I could say that on the game show end too, and I'm not going to go there. But I mean, look, John's still doing games, and he's. We don't know about any health problems. I mean, he's cut back his schedule a little bit, but he's still doing the games. So you know what? You got to cherish it. Enjoy every game like you enjoy every day in life. That's what.
And he still sounds pretty damn good. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, has he missed a step? I mean, that's natural. But you know what? I mean, there aren't many 80.
Sam Rosen's missed a step, but I still love Sam Rosen with the Rangers.
Yeah, and he still, but he takes some range games off and he's cut back because he doesn't no longer do the NFL on Fox. But you know what? He's still going strong. I mean, in today's day and age, when people get to live longer lives because of technology and doctors and stuff, I mean, we could see announcers, doing this for years upon years upon years, and the broadcasting industry is strong. You know what? You've got a lot of good young up and coming guys, and you got good guys. You have guys right now that are like at the top right now that are pretty young too. I'll go back to the NFL and Fox for a second, which just on Monday released their broadcasting teams for the upcoming season. Their lead guy right now is Kevin Burkhardt. I mean, Kevin Burkhardt, somebody could do this for 30, 40 years. Their number 2 guy this year is Joe Davis. Think about that. So the broadcasting business is going strong, is going to be strong for a while. But obviously the guys like Vin Scully, Dick Enberg, all those guys who we grew up on, we'll always remember them.
I'm still sad about John Madden too.
Oh, that absolutely. And Pat Summerall. Yeah.
Yep.
You know what? And It just makes me think of a great moment between those two, and it doesn't even have to involve NFL football. But we'll save that for off the air. But yeah, Vin will be missed. But you know what? The tributes, the memories, and you can always remember him because you could go on social media, you can go on YouTube, and go back and watch some of his old games, and he'll always be there. But he'll be missed, that's for sure. But switching gears to a much lighter story, there are two things in sports that it seems like we can't go a week without talking about, and we're going to try and get to both of them here. Number one is Deshaun Watson, which we'll get to in a little bit. But what wouldn't the summer be without talking about the Brooklyn Nets and Kevin Durant? So this news broke from Shams Charania on Monday. So in a meeting with Nets owner Joe Tsai, Kevin Durant, of course, good old Kevin Durant, once again making news, reiterated his trade request and informed Tsai that he needs to choose between Durant or the pairing of GM Sean Marks and coach Steve Nash. So Hank, the first person I thought about when I heard about the story, and we actually were going to have him on to talk about to promote something that's happening on Empty the Bench. So stay tuned for that in just a couple of minutes. But we got to get our buddy Nick Morganson in here, the biggest Nets fan on the Empty the Bench podcast network, because I can only imagine, because when this broke a couple of hours before we recorded the show, Nick's the first guy I thought about. So let's get Nick Morganson in here, the biggest Nets fan here. So Nick, the floor is yours. This breaks, and what are you thinking about?
Well, I'm not surprised. Let's start there first. Well, so we all know Kevin Durant is a drama king. I'm not even going to use drama queen at this point. But my point is Kevin Durant is demanding a trade. Gee, we haven't heard that one before. And then on top of it, I said this a few weeks ago. I said this on a roundtable we did for this show for the NBA. I said it on Empty the Bench probably a month ago at least now. I said, Steve Nash is going to be the fall guy. He's going to get fired. Well, guess what? Now he's demanding that he's fired after him and Kyrie Irving said, let's bring Steve Nash in as a coach when he's never coached at any level.
Yeah, and you know my thoughts about this, and I actually had a reaction to this, which I'll get to in a couple moments. But to me, I get this is going to fall on the head coach, but I don't know how last year you can blame Steve Nash because he had to change his roster and his lineups around so many times because of the situation with Kyrie Irving. It's like, that's a situation where how do you blame him?
I wouldn't blame Steve Nash. Steve Nash should have never have been there to begin with. That's the issue that people are not seeing. People say, oh, this is Steve Nash's fault. I will never say specifically that it's Steve Nash's fault, but how can you be a head coach in the NBA if you've never even coached at the college level?
You start to see that though with a lot of teams now. I mean, I remember that happened with Derek Fisher. You're almost starting to see that a little bit in baseball. I understand it's different in baseball, but you see these guys that retire and almost a year or two later go into the coaching business. I mean, it's almost like that happening. Steve Kerr, there's another guy. I mean, I understand it was a few years, but I mean, Steve Kerr does it.
Yeah, but at least Steve Kerr was a GM of a franchise. He had experience putting a team together. So I guess going from being a GM or assistant to the GM to being a coach is not a major jump compared to what Steve Nash did, where he was retired. He played a bunch of years. Okay, but what's your coaching experience?
And by the way, it doesn't work the other way around where you go from coach to GM. Just look at Phil Jackson. Oh, God.
Well, he was doing both. Not just one. He was doing both at the same time.
And that shouldn't be the case. It should have been one or the other, but I don't want to relive those days.
But the one thing you're talking about is like when a catcher, that's the big position in Major League Baseball. The catchers are the most popular position that go to managers. Look at Mike Soto, who was a great manager for a long time until he kind of got run out of the Angels. And now they might lose their manager again, considering the way their situation is going.
Yeah, that's awful right now. What's going on there?
But why are we catering to KD? I don't understand this. And someone made a good point I was watching over the past couple of days. His stock is down now because the Warriors won a championship without him.
Yeah.
So why would you trade for him knowing that the Warriors didn't need him after he left?
It's funny you bring that up, and I'm sorry, Hank. Let me just get this one last thing, and then I'll get you in here. That was going to be my next thing. So obviously, talk about Kevin Durant, being traded. The longer this goes, and now this probably doesn't help his trade value either.
No, It absolutely doesn't help his trade value. One, because he's hurt. Two,
He's old. Yeah.
you would think it would help that he just signed a 4-year contract. And you know my feeling about the whole signing a contract and then asking out. The NBA has been investigating into trying to stop players from saying, hey, you know what? I don't like the first year I spent with my team. I'm demanding a trade. Now, I don't know if you guys agree with me on the whole demanding of a trade situation is ridiculous, but he's got to play it out. I'm sorry. He's got to play it out. He's got to play at least one more year. You can't lose faith in a team after 1 year of signing a contract. You can't.
Yeah. Hank?
Yeah, I'm not surprised either. Kevin Durant, as talented and as great as he is, he's proven once again that he just loves finding a way to screw over his teams. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. And I hate to say this, and he would hate me because he's a social media troll and he goes after everybody on Twitter.
KD probably hates everybody right now.
He's not Michael Jordan. He's not LeBron James. He's none of these top guys. I know, like, he would get mad at me if I said something like this, but what has he won except for being with the Warriors? That was Steph Curry's team. Everyone keeps saying that because KD won the Finals MVP and he was the regular MVP with the Warriors, it's his team. It was never his team. It was Steph Curry's team.
So now that the discussion is about what teams now are most likely trade destinations, and according to Shams, they're saying the Raptors, the Celtics, and the Heat are. And I remember we were talking about this when initially he was requesting his trade. I just wonder, the longer this drags out, it's less and less likely that this is going to happen.
Now, will he be willing to sit out if he doesn't get traded? Now, you don't see that very often in the NBA. Players don't usually sit out unless you're John Wall, who was getting way overpaid by the Rockets and then eventually got paid to leave and went to the Clippers. Or Ben Simmons. Well, Ben Simmons was actually hurt. Well, it's debatable how hurt.
Was he? I don't even know.
How hurt was he? Because there was a rumor that he was going to play in Game 4 of the Celtics series, and that never happened.
I remember that. That was some of the wackiest stuff that I can ever recall.
But Durant's got to play with the Nets. And that's forget me being a Net fan. This is me talking about a star playing in the NBA. You signed a 4-year contract. You're going to make $200 million. You have more money than you know what to do with. Just play the game. Your reputation is zero right now.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of it for the Nets. My buddy Rob tweeted me. He kind of agrees with you. He should have never gotten the job. He thinks that he's an awful coach, should have never gotten the job, and he thinks it should have been Jeff Van Gundy. I don't know about Van Gundy, but Nash is in like a no-win spot because
Van Gundy is no, that's a terrible comparison.
What's that?
I hate that you're putting Jeff Van Gundy in this. Jeff Van Gundy was actually
no. I think
he's saying that he thinks that Van Gundy should have been the coach.
Oh! Sorry, I totally misheard you. Then in that case, yeah, I would agree with that.
I agree. Van Gundy would be a good coach. I just think he's having too much fun on TV calling the NBA games on ESPN and ABC.
Well, I mean, considering he's been away from coaching for a long time since leaving the Rockets in 2007, yeah, I don't think he wants to leave that post anytime soon. And fun fact, by the way, he lived in Capitol when he coached the Knicks, where I grew up.
The game's changed so much, too, that his coaching style, I don't know if it would even make it in this league now the way it is. The game's changed a ton.
I mean, if that were the case, then go get Mark Jackson, if that's who you really want. But because Mark Jackson was rumored to be the Knicks head coach like 5, 6, 7 years ago. The Nets were talking to him because there was a little bit of Durant connection there. The problem is no one wants to coach KD. KD has kind of entered the realm of, I don't want to coach LeBron James circle. Like, because LeBron is going to run his own team. He's going to be the owner. He's going to be the GM, the peanut vendor. He'll be everything. He'll be the cleanup crew after the game is over. I mean, so KD is the same thing. He wants to run the franchise, and that's why Kyrie is cowering and running away because now he doesn't want to do whatever KD wants.
Yeah, but he opted into that $36.7 million option.
That was more semantics. I think they're going to desperately try to get out from under that.
Real quick before we let you go, so what do you think happened? I don't know anymore. I try and figure this out. I thought that if Durant was going to go, it was going to be early. And now the longer this drags out, I think he's not going to go. And now this, to me, makes me think that he's not going to go. But so what do you think ends up happening? Do you think that anything happens, or Nash goes, or what happens here?
If they want KD on the court, and this is going to sound stupid because I don't agree with it, but if they want KD on the court, Nash has got to go. Nash has got to go. I think he's going to get fired. They should have never have made the connection in the first place. Now, I wish they would stop pandering to KD, or like any other team in the NBA, they pander to their star rather than build around the star. That's the big issue we got here. So I think that's what I think is going to happen. I think they should get rid of Nash anyway, but they need to build around KD and tell KD, look, you just signed a contract. We're not trading you.
Yeah. I think the NBA, the players have so much power. It is not crazy to think that the way the NBA is right now, when their CBA runs out, they could be heading down a very dark territory. And I believe it runs out at the end of
next season.
Yeah. So
look at what happened to Harden. I'll give you an example. How many teams did he force his way out of before getting to Philly?
Yeah.
That's my example. Look at LeBron. LeBron was moving himself around.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah. No. Well, it's just the drama just continues, and it's crazy because you know what, the Nets are still a good team, but boy, this is just like, I don't know where this goes from here. But Nick's with us, and on a much lighter note, got a very special announcement here on the Empty the Bench podcast network, happening on episode 147 of Empty the Bench, which premieres on Wednesday. So Nick, tell us about it. What's going on?
Now, this is rare. Now, we've all done our fair share of interviews on shows. We've had journalists, we've had reporters, we've had everybody. This is different. We have 2 top 5 Yankee prospects coming on to the show. Anthony Volpe, we all know, number 1 overall prospect in the Yankee organization. Prize shortstop, everyone comparing him to Derek Jeter, so on. And then we have Austin Wills, the number 5 overall prospect, catcher in the organization. Both are going to be on for a exclusive dual interview on the show coming up on Wednesday.
Absolutely. When the episode drops at 3 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, and you can catch Empty the Bench every Wednesday here on the Empty the Bench podcast network. Nick, thanks for joining us for a few minutes, and hopefully this net situation fixes itself out for you, and then we'll definitely look forward to that interview with the 2 Yankee prospects for sure. And who knows? I mean, if they're up in the majors, Volpe's up next year, and Wells maybe 2 years from now, we'll say, hey, we know where they got started. We know where we knew those guys when they were down in the minors for sure.
I'll leave it off on this funny note. At least you didn't talk about tampering with Jalen Brunson.
The tampering thing's just crazy because you know what? Because they're talking about tampering with Harden. Look, what happened with the NFL in the NFL, that tampering thing, that's tampering. I'm sorry. If Jalen Brunson, I'll say it again. If the situation with, and you want me to make my face to turn red, I will right now. If the Knicks situation, if that is tampering, then so is everything in the NBA.
Everything is tampering. You and I have said this.
Yeah, everything is tampering except it's just tampering when the NBA feels like it is. And I'm not going to go into the conspiracies of that, it's the Knicks. It's whenever the NBA feels like it's tampering, that's when they're going to announce it's tampering. And they want to make it sharp because they said they increased the fines in 2019. They announced that they were going to increase the fines to $10 million, loss of draft, up to $10 million, loss of draft picks. Yeah, they're just trying to make it sound like they're harsh. Tampering happens all the time in the NBA. It even happens to the team's own free agents.
I'll just leave it at that. I just wanted to see Johnny get angry over a Knicks thing. But
it was either that or baseball. And you know what? We've actually had a good amount of baseball stuff to talk on the field for once. So, you know what?
I'll let you finish the episode. Nice
thanks
talking
for joining us, and we'll see you on Empty the Bench on Wednesday.
All right, see you around.
All right, that's Nick Morganson, our resident Nets fan. You know, when that news broke on Monday about from Shams, I was like, he's the first person I thought of. And that Nets situation is just nuts.
He's one of the few people I know who've stuck with them since New Jersey, so I agree with that.
You know what? That's absolutely true. And, my buddy Rob McNally, who I'm good friends with back on Long Island, and, he's very realistic, too, when it comes to the Nets. And, you know what? That's fair and I think him and Nick both agree about that Nash should have never gotten the job. And Van Gundy would have been nice, but I just don't know. Nick said, Van Gundy hasn't coached in such a long time, and you said it too. He hasn't coached in such a long time, and the NBA's changed so
look
much.
how John Gruden turned out with the Raiders.
Yeah, and now obviously we know
he was there. He wasn't there for a while, and sometime, and actually not sometimes, most of the time, you just can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah, no, that is for sure. All right, so speaking of football, we got a couple of minutes left here on the show, and wouldn't have been a summer without talking about Kevin Durant or Deshaun Watson. So the news broke last week about Watson, of course, when we're not on the air, that Sue Robinson, the judge, 6-game suspension for Watson. So, of course, gave the NFL a couple of days to decide if they wanted to appeal. And to nobody's surprise, I think, Hank, they did announce they were going to appeal. So now we just sit around and we wait for where this transpires. I think what's crazy is between now and our next episode, I think we're going to have a decision. Now, the thing about that, though, is so let's say that they do decide to go for a longer suspension. That's why you're appealing, and it's probably going to be longer. Then the NFLPA is going to come out and counter, and they're going to probably sue, and this is going to become an absolutely chaotic situation. So, what do you think happens with Watson and where it goes from here?
I think he's going to get a longer suspension, and regardless of what happens, it is just going to get ugly. This whole thing's been dragging a long time. All these accusations. Yeah. Needless to say, I think you can tell I'm getting sick and tired of hearing that fucker's name. Excuse my French once again.
Well, I mean, we got some progress, when we heard that the decision was going to be announced. I'm still mind blown that it was only 6 games when you had somebody put in a small amount of money for gambling and he gets the whole. Well, see, that's the thing. If Calvin Ridley does not get that 1-year suspension, then the 6-game suspension for Deshaun Watson kind of makes sense because according to Sue Robinson's findings,
does it though?
Well, because I think that's the most you can get suspended for under the personal conduct or domestic violence policy. Now, that's something that has to get changed. That's for sure. Anything that the domestic violence should be a year. But when you compare that to the Calvin Ridley situation, and you're basically saying that the gambling is worse than what Watson did, that's what makes it look really bad, in my opinion. If Robinson said there was no clear-cut evidence, then the 6-game suspension is understandable. But we do know about all the cases. Now, they're going to also tell you that, that most of the lawsuits have been settled. So that could be another reason why the 6-game suspension happened. But I think you said it too. Once we found out that it was 6 games, that it was only going to be a matter of time before the NFL decided. And Roger Goodell did designate former New Jersey General Peter C. Harvey to hear the appeal of Watson's suspension. And from some of the reporting that you read and heard on TV, they want to move with this relatively quick. So that's why I think they're at some point this week we're going to have a decision, and then it's going to come back on Watson's side, Watson's camp, to see what they do. But I think there's going to be no question it's going to be a longer suspension. But are we talking 8 games? Are we talking about 1 season? Are we talking about indefinite? That's what's going to be something to watch here.
Okay, I guess I can sort of make sense of that whole thing based on the legal part, but still, I don't agree with the idea of suspending him for only 6 games, given all the circumstances.
Well, see, yeah, and like you said, if we're not talking about Ridley, if Ridley's suspension does not happen, then then I hate to say it, but reading Robinson's findings and her report and everything, then the 6-game suspension makes sense. But you're comparing that to Ridley and others who get suspended for a longer time for doing less. That's where the optics look really bad. And now the real optics also are when Watson's allowed to be in camp, almost going to be able to possibly play preseason games. It's an awful look. I mean, the Browns are a mess right now. I mean, between this, now Kareem Hunt supposedly wants to be traded, or he wants to be traded, and the Browns are saying no. There's a lot going on out there, and I still say this: if we find out that Watson is going to be suspended indefinitely, and that holds up, the Browns to me are a team to watch for in the Jimmy Garoppolo sweepstakes, because a couple of weeks ago, the 49ers GM John Lynch had said that they basically are saying that Trey Lance is going to start out there. So that's something to watch out there. And, a couple of other quick nuggets with football, and then we'll get out of here. Something to watch. Also, Matthew Stafford dealing with like a baseball elbow kind of injury out there with the Rams. Something to watch there, because they're too bad. If that's going to be barking all year, and if he ends up getting really hurt and having to miss time, I mean, their backup QBs are guys that played in pretty much minor league football, either the XFL, the Alliance of American Football. And so that's something to watch there with the Rams. And then the battle in Carolina. Now there's been, Matt Rule not putting a timetable on the quarterback position. And then you hear reports that they're trying to trade Sam Darnold, but nobody's willing to take that fifth-year salary. I was thinking maybe an outside team that would take a run at Darnold could be the 49ers if they decide to move on from Garoppolo. But I think this is all, talk. I'd be very surprised if it's anybody but Baker Mayfield. I think, Rule's just doing this to try and maybe get the best out of both players. Because let's be honest, Rule's coaching for his life right now. If the Carolina Panthers don't do anything this year, he's going to be gone.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And he's lucky they don't want to pay severance. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think Baker's winning that job. There's no way you can convince me it's going to be Sam Darnold unless he does something absolutely shocking, or unless something very bad happens to Baker. But
I think it's just all talk. I think he's just trying to get the best out of both players. But Hank, we've got football back. We had the Hall of Fame game last Thursday. I always say the Hall of Fame game is always special, because it just you had that feeling of football coming back. It's one step closer. It's that opportunity for us to talk about it. Everybody's starting to play preseason games starting this week, including our football giants. It takes us one step closer, and we're only a couple of weeks away now from it happening for real. College is right around the corner. It's exciting. That's it gets you in that happy mode. It gets you ready for what you're going to be doing on Thursday night, all day Sunday, and Monday night for 17 weeks. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so the preseason games start. And also, if you're a big broadcasting fan, you get to see the newly looked Sunday night football team on NBC. Fox Sports on Monday posted their broadcasting teams for the 2022 season. So it's happening here. We're just a couple of weeks away, but you get some preseason action. And then who knows, you get any other news and notes. The Watson stuff we're still waiting on. If there's news that breaks, stay tuned here to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. We'll have a breaking news video about that. But Hank, that just about puts a bow on a very, very big episode of Game On. So thanks so much for joining me again.
Always a pleasure, Johnny.
That's right. And let's go Yanks, right? And Giants and Rangers. Season's coming close there too. Way that rally towel. There it is.
Man, I was tempted.
Absolutely. So again, folks, quick programming note in case you missed the news. Make sure to check out our buddies over on Empty the Bench, Nick Morganson, Nick Federa, and Tom Albano. Big exclusive dual interview with Yankee prospects Anthony Volpe and Austin Wells. That is debuting on Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And, of course, you can check that out anytime on our YouTube channel. Also, make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And, of course, our personal handles there on the bottom of the screen. We are presented by Knack. We thank them, as always, for sponsoring us and here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. So, for Hank and Dictor, I am Johnny Montalbano. This has been Game On the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, presented by Knack. And we will talk to you again next week.